All right, so today we're tackling something, pretty heavy, pretty prevalent. I think a lot of our listeners can relate to substance abuse in college. We see it in movies, we hear stories. What's the reality?
And it's more than just stories, right? It's about understanding the why. Why are college students particularly vulnerable? And what can we do to support them?
Totally. And our sources this week, they really dive deep into this perfect storm, as they call it, this combination of factors that can make college such a risky time.
Yeah, you've got that pressure to fit in, right? Everyone's doing it. You don't want to be the odd one out. And on top of that, the stress levels are through the roof. Classes, exams, future career stuff. It's a lot.
And let's not forget the easy access, right? I mean, it's not exactly a secret that substances are, well, readily available on most college campuses.
Exactly. And then you throw in this newfound freedom, often being away from home, less parental supervision. It's kind of a recipe for trouble, if you think about it.
And the numbers really drive that home, right?
Yeah.
One stat that just blew my mind, nearly 27.4% of college students reported binge drinking. That's huge.
Huge, and also potentially really dangerous. We're not just talking about having a good time. This is behavior that can spiral, leading to serious substance use disorders down the line.
So that brings up an important distinction, right? Substance abuse versus addiction. Our sources use those terms very deliberately.
Absolutely, because there's a difference. Substance abuse, that's when your use, whatever the substance is, starts messing with your life. Skipping class, blowing off assignments, relationships suffer.
Basically, when it starts catching up with you, having real consequences.
Exactly. Addiction, though, that's a whole other ballgame. It's a medical condition, It's not about willpower at that point. It's about your brain chemistry actually changing.
Wow, so it's not something you can just like snap your fingers and quit?
Exactly. It takes time, support, the right treatment. And that's why it's so important to recognize the signs early on, both in yourself and in the people you care about.
So let's say someone's listening, right? And they're thinking, maybe this hits a little close to home. What are some red flags? What should they be looking out for?
Well, changes in behavior are a big one. Are they isolating themselves, skipping out on things they used to enjoy, grades starting to slip? Those are all potential indicators.
And it's not just the academic stuff, right? It can also show up in their relationships, too.
Absolutely. Becoming more secretive, maybe even defensive or hostile, if you try to talk to them about it.
That's really helpful to know. And, it's important to emphasize that there's no shame in seeking help. If you're noticing these signs, it's a sign of strength to reach out, not weakness.
100%. The sooner you address it, the better the outcome. So let's dig into some of the specifics, the substances themselves. And we've got to start with the big one, right? Alcohol. It's practically synonymous with college.
Right. Like, is it even a party without it? But kidding aside, our sources were really clear about the dangers of binge drinking, which is unfortunately still super common on campuses.
It is, and it's not hard to see why. Think about it. New environment, new people, you want to fit in, loosen up a little, and alcohol, it often gets presented as this magic bullet for all that.
And let's be real, you've got this whole rite of passage thing surrounding college drinking, which doesn't exactly help.
Totally, like it's almost expected, you
Yeah.
know? And then on top of alcohol, you've got the rise of what people call study drugs.
Right, like Adderall, Ritalin, things like that. And there's this misconception that because they're prescribed, they're somehow safe. Like, oh, it's fine, I just needed to focus.
And nothing could be further from the truth, right?
Right.
Using these without a prescription, it's not only illegal, but it can be incredibly dangerous. We're talking about potential for addiction, serious side effects. It's not worth the risk.
It's like people trying to hack their brain chemistry, looking for that quick fix, but it can backfire so easily.
It can. And then, of course, you've got marijuana. Now, this one's interesting because the legal landscape is constantly changing. More states are legalizing it, but it's still federally illegal, which creates a lot of confusion.
It really does.
Yeah.
So how do we even begin to address that in this context?
Well, I think it starts with education, providing accurate information about the potential risks and benefits, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Totally. And dispelling those myths.
Yeah.
Because I've heard it all. It helps me focus. It makes me more creative. But then you've also got the potential for memory impairment, anxiety. It's a mixed bag.
It really is. And we can't forget about the legal ramifications, especially for students who might be on campus in dorms where it's still prohibited.
Okay, so we've got alcohol, we've got study drugs, we've got marijuana. What else? What other substances are we seeing pop up on the college scene?
Well, then you get into what some might call party drugs or club drugs, things like ecstasy, MDMA, ketamine, even LSD. And these are often associated with the whole club and rave scene, altering consciousness, enhancing social experiences.
Right, I've heard them called that too.
And while they might seem appealing in that context, it's crucial to remember that they can be highly addictive and come with their own set of risks.
Like, what kind of risks are we talking about here? Give us the rundown.
Well, for one thing, the lack of regulation in how they're produced is a huge concern. There's no quality control. You really don't know what you're getting or how your body's going to react.
So it's like playing Russian roulette with your brain chemistry.
Pretty much. And then you've got the potential for unpredictable and intense effects, paranoia, anxiety, even dehydration and heat stroke. It can get very serious very quickly.
It sounds like there's a lot more to it than people realize.
Absolutely. And the long-term effects of some of these substances, they're still being studied, but we do know that they can have a lasting impact on mental health, on brain function. It's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah, this is a lot heavier than just a few beers at a party. This is serious stuff. But that's why we're having this conversation, right? To break it all down, provide some clarity, because knowledge is power, especially when it comes to making healthier choices.
It really is. And, it's about empowering people to make those choices, to feel like they have options, that they're not stuck.
Totally. And that really brings us to a perfect point, right? Treatment and recovery. Because it can feel overwhelming knowing where to even start.
Absolutely. But the good news is there are resources out there, and our sources, they lay out a really clear roadmap for what's available.
Okay, so first up, we've got inpatient and outpatient treatment. Can you break those down for us? What's the difference?
Sure. So inpatient, that's basically what it sounds like, right? You're checking into a facility, 24/7 care, structured environment, really for those who need that intensive support, kind of hit the reset button.
Gotcha. So it's like a temporary immersion to really focus on getting better.
Exactly. Outpatient, on the other hand, that's more flexible. You're living at home, attending therapy, support groups, but still maintaining your daily routine as much as possible.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Addressing the addiction while still juggling the rest of your life.
Right. And within both of those settings, there are all sorts of evidence-based therapies that have proven to be super effective.
Okay, like what? Give us the rundown on some of the go-to therapies.
Well, one that comes up a lot, and our sources highlight it too, is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's kind of a mouthful, but it's all about identifying those negative thought patterns and behaviors that are contributing to the substance use.
So it's like rewiring your brain, essentially.
In a way, yeah. It's about giving people the tools to manage cravings, cope with triggers, make healthier choices in those moments when they might be tempted to use.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about DBT? Our sources mentioned that one too. What is that all about?
So DBT, that stands for dialectical behavior therapy, and it has some overlap with CBT, but it really emphasizes emotional regulation and mindfulness.
Interesting. So it's about learning to handle those tough emotions without resorting to substances to numb them out.
Exactly. Being present in the moment, accepting those emotions without judgment, and developing healthy coping mechanisms, that's what DBT is all about.
Sounds like it could be really powerful, especially in those early stages of recovery. And it's not just about individual therapy either, right? There's also the whole support group aspect.
100%. Groups like AA, NA, those can be absolute lifelines for people in recovery.
Because sometimes you just need that connection with others who really get it, who've been there.
Absolutely. It's that sense of community, of not being alone in this, that can make all the difference. And, one thing I think is so important to remember is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to recovery.
Right. Everyone's journey is going to be different. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And that's why finding the right treatment plan, the right therapist, the right support system, that's absolutely crucial.
So let's say someone's listening to this, right?
Yeah.
And they're thinking, okay, this is me, I need help, or someone I love does. What's the first step? Who do you even reach out to?
It might sound simple, but a great place to start is your primary care physician. They can assess the situation, offer guidance, connect you with resources in your area.
And if that feels too intimidating, there are always hotlines, online resources, places you can turn to 24/7 for confidential support. We'll be sure to include all of that in our show notes.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of a trusted friend, a family member, a teacher, a counselor. Having that support system is so important.
It really does take a village. Speaking of support systems, our sources also touched on the role of colleges themselves in addressing this issue.
Yeah, and they have a huge responsibility there, right? To create a culture of support, of open dialogue, where students feel comfortable seeking help without being judged or penalized.
Right, like it shouldn't be taboo to talk about these things.
Exactly. And beyond that, it's about providing accessible and affordable counseling services, having those resources readily available on campus.
Because the reality is, this is a health issue, and it should be treated with the same importance as any other health concern.
100%. And I think that's a really important point to make. One thing that really jumped out at me as we were going through these sources was the statistic about college drinking. Almost half of all college students reported drinking alcohol. That's a lot.
It's huge, and it really makes you wonder, what does that say about the culture, the expectations surrounding alcohol in college? And how can we, as a society, start promoting healthier habits for these young adults?
It's a big question, right? And I don't think there are any easy answers, but I think it starts with challenging those norms, those assumptions about what it means to be a college student.
Does it always have to involve alcohol?
Right. It's about starting that conversation, providing accurate information about the risks, and empowering students to make responsible choices.
And that responsibility, it doesn't just fall on the students themselves, right? Parents, educators, policymakers, we all have a role to play in creating a supportive environment that encourages healthy habits.
Absolutely. It's about shifting the culture from one of silence and stigma to one of openness, support, and harm reduction.
It's about creating a space where, they feel empowered to prioritize their well-being, their mental health, and knowing that it's okay to ask for help. It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Absolutely. And it's a journey worth taking.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've really dug deep into this issue, substance abuse in college, the why, the what now, all of it.
And I think if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this conversation, it's that there's hope, recovery is possible, and there are people out there who care, who want to help.
Couldn't agree more. So if you're out there listening and something's resonating with you, maybe you're struggling, maybe someone you love is, please know you're not alone. Reach out, seek help. There are resources out there, and we'll be sure to link to a bunch of them in our show notes.
Please do take that first step. It can be life-changing.
Absolutely. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, take care of yourselves and each other.